Welcome everyone to another AZ Ray video. Today we're going to have a little fun and maybe blow your mind. We'll see. Today's topic is magic and sorcery. And this was actually recommended by a subscriber. So thank you so much for your suggestion. So the way I chose to go about this, because I was thinking about how I could make this accessible for you guys and make you have like the most benefit of it. So the way we're going to break this down is that we're going to talk about like define sorcery, explain what it is, and then we're going to basically break down what magic could be and what researchers have talked about magic. So I'm going to go into different sections and to kind of like break this down because this is actually a heavy topic, right? But I'm going to do my best to not go too crazy deep with it, but analyze the important part of it. Because what I think as I was going through this research path, I think the most important thing that I was trying to uncover is what is magic? Because I think that's the bigger question. I did another video that talked about witchcraft and all the things that women had to go through being persecuted through witchcraft. So if you want to check out that video, hopefully you guys enjoy that one as well. But yeah, so this one's about sorcery. And yeah, this is how we're going to break it down. So first, we're going to talk about the difference between witchcraft and sorcery. Two, we're going to talk about all the different regions of the world and their examples of different forms of sorcery. And then we're going to talk about religion and magic because they have a very connected history. Our attempt here at AZ Ray Videos to define magic. And then just our closing thoughts. So let's get into it, guys. It's a juicy subject right here. So, okay. So what I found the difference between witchcraft and sorcery. So on my other video, I didn't really define witchcraft in this essence. I was more after like all the hardship and persecution that women went through. That's kind of the angle that I went through it. But here we're going to clearly define it. The difference between witchcraft and sorcery. So witchcraft is something that you're born with and you have the ability to access. Sorcery is something that you have to learn about. You have to become an apprentice. You have to do various things to grow your skills. You have to like acquire them. You have to like work on it. In contrast to witchcraft, right? So that's the clear definition of it in contrast to witchcraft versus sorcery. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about all the various regions of the world. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say that. We're not going to do all. We're going to focus on a couple little sections to kind of give you some examples of sorcery, and then we're going to break down magic right after that. So first, we're going to start in Japan. Japan in the 7th century actually formed a sorcery ministry, and it was a combination of Shintoism, Buddhism, and Tennichi Jin and local Japanese folklore. And their goal with this is that they were trying to form various architectural buildings and making sure that they were functionally sound. Think of like feng shui. They wanted to make sure the energy was in the right place. They wanted to make sure the nature was like working well with it. So, and the way that these things were worked, these people were more believed to be engineers and builders and like crafters. So just take that in mind as well. Although they were classified as like sorcerers and whatnot, but they use the mentality as like builders. They also use like astronomy to help like guide them for certain things. And these people were actually credited for forming the first capitals in Japan, like Nara and Kyoto. And they're also credited for forming the first water clock in Japan. So now we're going to move our journey to Nigeria. Nigeria is prevalent with different forms of sorcery backgrounds. And one of the more well-known ones is actually Juju. And Juju is a very interesting form of like way of connecting people and talking about energies and how like we have this connected ability to kind of be more aware of each other and using our senses. One of the beliefs that also play a role when it comes to the ideology of the Juju sorcery belief system is that if you have twins, sometimes one of those twins is killed because it's believed that if you have two twins, one of them is some kind of like malevolent kind of like wrongdoing or mischievous kind of spirit. So that's like one of those belief systems that's actually often done. And the other thing about juju is that they're believed that people are believed to be born with those abilities. There is also some downfalls of juju. It's also seen that it's actually been used for sex trafficking, and it's also been used to actually accuse people of different crimes. And there's still news report articles of people being accused of like let's say like a sorcerer or someone who calls himself a wizard. Which, for the sake of this video, we're going to use those terms interchangeably. They would accuse people of like being some kind of witch or accusing them of being somebody wrong, and then they're like shunned in the community. So like I said earlier, it juju does a good job of bringing community, but because it also brings community, it also does a good job of separating them too. So it becomes complex, right? And I'm not saying this from a position of judgment or anything like that, but as I dive into later on, we'll talk about it too, is that magic and like sorcery and all these things and witchcraft as well. It's kind of almost like a way of forming like your belief system and your understandings of the world, but it's also a way of forming community and statehood and all those things as well. So it's it could be precarious, it could be dangerous. So you have to be mindful of that, right? And now we're going to move for another region, and we're talking about Niger. And I'm going to focus on a scholar, a friend of mine, Paul Stoller, who I was lucky enough to meet at a conference in 2023 in Dingle, and he talked about his experience with the Songhay people, and one of the regions that he focused on was on Niger, and it was very compelling, and because what's interesting about it is, just like I mentioned earlier in the whole juju belief system, the idea with the Songhay people is that they have the idea of being very senseness, being aware of their senses. So what's interesting is that Paul Stoller has a bunch of research articles as well as books talking about his experience as an apprentice sorcerer and making his way to become a sorcerer. One of the interesting things that he was told by his master was that he wasn't properly aware of his senses. He had to be more aware of things. He wasn't seeing things correctly. He needed to be more aware of it. And it was a very powerful experience, and it made him want to be more sensuousness. Okay, I'm not going to try. It's a hard word to say. Maybe I'll just put it in the video. Yeah, sensuousness. Sensuousness. Sorry, guys. English isn't my first language. It's just some words I just can't. Like rule. I don't know. I said that wrong. It's just one of those things. So Paul Stoller learned as an apprentice the value of being more aware of your senses, right? And not just using your eyes, right? Not just using your ears, but having like being perceptive, being aware, and how like the influence and the power that you can have on the world. Another interesting aspect that he learned from like another one of his various mentors was that people that are truly inclined and can believe in magic laugh with their full bodies. So people that aren't magically inclined, they don't they laugh with their heads. They just laugh with their heads, right? And so people that are powerful in sorcery, they're actually very funny people, and you need to laugh with your whole body. So you need to be like fully immersed and fully present. So here are some examples of some of the teachings of the Songhay people told by us from Paul Stoller. Some other brief examples that I'm going to talk about briefly is like the Obeah belief system, which is a Creole belief system that ends up being like a combination of like Christian beliefs, combination of like juju or of other belief systems, depending on the various regions of where they're from from their various roots, whether it's like Ghana, Nigeria, Niger, like previously mentioned, or maybe South Africa. It's like a diaspora, right? And a combination of things that gets blended of different belief systems. We also have the Czech Republic, which has a very famous story of the Golem of Prague, of this rabbi bringing potentially the statue to life and showing his like powerful abilities. And some people think that the golem haunted them. It's up to you to decide, right? So as we continue to expand on sorcery like around the world and talk about uh, different regions, I also just wanted to specify examples of people that have been labeled as sorcerers. So one of the examples is Crowley from England. He was like an occult leader, a Renaissance man, and he was believed to be like a deadly man that had like all these different potential abilities. I think it's more up to you guys if you think he's legit or a hoax, opportunist, or someone that was, leveraged power. Something that we're going to go into later on in the section, that maybe people are just opportunists, right? We have Rasputin, who's infamous. Some people blame him for the fall of Russia, or like the descent in Russia as far as like the revolution that happened. He was also, it could have been a compounding effect of like when Rasputin was in his influential role. And there was also like, the Russo-Japanese War, and like the country in general lost trust in the government as well as the Russian Orthodox Church. So all these compounding things were happening, and Rasputin was often seen as like a puppet master that was manipulating things behind the scenes. And then he has all these crazy feats of like supposedly coming back to life and whatnot. Did it happen or did it not happen? We don't really know. But these influential people, like Crowley and Rasputin, they left the impact, and maybe they were just manipulative. It's hard to see too. And then we have John Domingo, who's a famous voodoo sorcerer who used curses in Charleston, South Carolina, to kind of administer justice. And he used those curses, right? And it's a tricky thing too, right? Who are we to judge? It's, maybe contextually speaking, he felt justified based on the actions, but it's tricky. I'm not here to prove if these people are sorcerers or not. That would probably be its own video, and then it'd be probably be pretty hard to answer without like substantial evidence. But yeah, just wanted to mention some sorcerers and whatnot down. And of course, like always, I'm going to put those research articles below in case you guys are more curious, because I don't have time to go in depth into all these different topics as much as I want to. Or not, this video would be like 10 million hours. But if you want me to do that, I don't know, you got to incentivize me. I don't know, maybe if this video gets like 100 likes, then we'll make it happen. We'll dive deep. We'll dive deep. I'll put on a scuba outfit. We'll make it happen, dude. So now that we're done traveling the world and telling you about different examples of like sorcery and whatnot and magic, we're going to talk about the fun story of like religion and magic. They have a connected history. A lot of scholars have talked about that essentially like religion and magic are essentially trying to say the same thing, and they're just saying it in different ways. They're almost like competing against each other, right? We even have a group of quote unquote witch hunters or sorcerer hunters that was really big in the 1500s, because there was a rise of like Protestantism, Christianity, Lutheran, Anti-Baptist. And so there was this big rise to hunt the sinners, right? But in my opinion, it kind of just shows like a little bit of religious insecurity, right? Because if you're so powerful in your belief system and someone else believes another thing, their other thing shouldn't influence your beliefs. That's just my opinion. Just kind of let that in there. But, we're in different times now, so I guess it's up to the individual if they choose to be tolerant of these different ideas. If not, if you feel like you can see both sides of something. But yeah, and another reason why I bring this up as well too is that because a lot of these clashes and these stigmas kind of still exist today, whether we realize it or not, right? Like I know I grew up Catholic, and I know like growing up, you weren't allowed to read like Harry Potter or like certain books, or you weren't allowed to do certain things or watch certain movies because it's like you're condoning this other thing of like witchcraft and wizardry or magic, and it's seen as this other thing. But the more you actually look into magic and then you combine the whole thing of religion, it's kind of, they're very similar, right? And you would even argue that, like, isn't there like quote unquote magical feats in the Bible, in the Torah, in different like Muslim religious textbooks, right? So it's like you start seeing the similarities and the contradictions. And in my opinion, like I said earlier, kind of comes off as a little insecure. Like I've stated in previous videos, I'm a fideist. So I separate science and faith. So I try to have like a neutral stance where I can observe something scientifically, but I'm also a person that has like a very strong faith and belief system. You know what I mean? Because I do believe that there's a God. I do believe in a higher power. But I think when I think of God, I think of it's like a interconnected energy that connects all things. Or also, you can interpret it as a form of like gravity, adrenaline, chi, metabolism. People that know me know that I say this cheesy line all the time. So, so yeah, I think it's interesting that there's like a lot of similarities between magic and religion. And okay. So now in this next section, we're going to attempt to define magic. Yep, I know. How are we going to do this? I don't know. Do you know? Does he know? Or does that thing know? We'll find out right now. So social theorists like Weber, Durkheim, Moss defined, as I stated earlier, as religion and magic essentially two competing entities that are trying to basically understand the world. They're both trying to achieve the same thing. They just have separate approaches of doing things. And the other things too is that usually the people that are attacked is because they're marginalized, right? As I said in the other video that I made on witchcraft, it's most of the time it has to do with sexism, position of power, people of color. So people are like preferences about on who they want to shame and neglect and whatnot. So all those also play a role on who governs or who controls things. And another interesting aspect that researchers talk about is that magic and belief system actually have been proven and used to help people with their psychological needs, whether it's some kind of form of like incantation, some kind of like mental breath work, meditation. Sometimes is also seen as a form of magic as well. And that also goes slightly into the previous topic when I talked about magic and religion, because, sometimes some religions are insecure of other religions like Buddhism, Shintoism, Confucianism, even though I've also been told that Buddhism is more of a philosophy than a religion, but that's that's a whole nother topic, but just something else to keep in mind. And then another thing that's tricky too when it comes to magic is that there's kind of like a group of non-believers or believers or people that are more like open to it. What the heck do I mean by that, right? So like there's an example of people trying to prove that magic exists in a different way, and they try to like back it up. Like there was like a popular podcast called Telepathy Tales that talked about how people that are autistic have the ability to speak telepathically with like family members, most of the time some like a close like parental figure, and they can access this ability and they can have these conversations, right? So this is where these belief systems and magic can also become dangerous. Just like we've said earlier, when we gave the example of like the attacks from like Nigeria, as well as like the attacks just in general that we know from like, Salem witch trials or other persecutions of people being attacked as witches, as well as I stated earlier about the witch hunters that began during the 1600s. So we see these like patterns of people being like attacked and like shunned upon and whatnot. And tricky because you have to be mindful of this. So like when you're saying something's real, right? And when my problem with this telepathy tales is that a lot of this this amazing conclusive evidence is done behind a podcast. So when you actually analyze the visual mediums, the science and parts of it seem a little off and they don't seem factual. Do I believe that there's a benefit to bonding? Do I think there's benefit to awareness and that it's something that you can learn on, definitely. But calling it telepathy and saying everyone can access it, I'm still open to the possibility of it, but I think it's dangerous to kind of say that telepathy is straight up real and that anybody can access it. I think that's potentially dangerous, especially people from autistic communities, to provide this kind of type of solution and say it's true. It could be potentially harmful. But I do believe that there is a benefit to bonding, and I think you can have some kind of like powerful connection that can help you better enhance your your connection with your loved one, especially if that person's autistic or whatnot. So I think that's important. So that's why I'm saying like it's important to define magic, and because and it's when you say these type of terms like telepathy, which is kind of believed to be like a magic power or like a power or an ability, right? So I feel like we have to also be careful. And just like I stated in this little tangent, that you kind of have to also be open to these ideas, open to these magical possibilities. And as you heard in my commentary, I am open to it. But that's the type of person at least I'll hear it out. I'll kind of, okay, let me see. You know what I mean? Let me see what's going on there exactly. So I'm open to it. I'm open to hearing about it, but I think in this case, it's actually pretty harmful, and you have to be mindful of it. But just to kind of wrap up the telepathy topic, because it's something that's kind of been recently pushed upon and proven, or attempted to be proven, that it is like a real magical thing. I think bonding is a real thing that does work. I'm sure you guys have noticed it for those who are pet owners, that you feel like your dog is reading your mind. There is studies that are kind of proving that there is some kind of quote unquote telepathic connection. But I think that's also more associated with bonding as well. Or maybe it's a combination of both. Do you guys agree? You guys let me know. Leave a comment below. So now to try another way that we can attempt to define magic would be the idea that music is magic. Because music comes from this unknown source, right? You hear musicians and songwriters and composers talk about this kind of stuff all the time. They say, the music doesn't come from me. I wouldn't even explain it, right? And if you're a person of faith, they usually credit, God, their creator, their maker. Or some people that are maybe more agnostic or maybe atheist wouldn't necessarily credit God, but they would say, it doesn't come from me. It comes from something else, right? The hive mind of other people, or you know what I mean? Or it's one of those things too. But then there's other people that think that like music isn't created, it's recreated. It's just like patterns that repeat themselves. And how we rediscover and repeat those patterns are kind of magical. And the other thing too is that, music has this way of uniting people, and it also has this way of healing people and creating all these like positive emotions and energy shifts within a person, right? And then music has also like literally healed people when they've done research studies and neuroscience studies about the benefits of just having wind chimes for like relaxing people, for healing people. And that goes into other things too, if you like follow things with like chakras and stuff, right? And so like, and it's kind of a combination of music, religion, and like, I hope you guys are starting to kind of see the connection that I made to earlier about the similarities between religion and music, and now we're seeing magic, and it's all kind of starting to make a little bit more sense, right? So that's why I use these different examples, right? Of like, our researchers' ideas of like religion and magic, and then the belief of telepathy, but I would call it bonding, and then music, right? So then like, what is magic, right? Is magic undefinable? Is magic not what you think it is? Or is magic just something that we watch in a movie that just makes us believe, something that we can imagine? Now this takes us to the final section, the closing thoughts. So the way I'm going to attempt to answer this question has to do with the process of learning and confidence and our belief systems. So how we learn things depends on everybody. Everybody learns things completely differently, right? And depending on the lifestyle, the community, your surroundings, your upbringing, the city that you live in, the country that you live in, that influences who you are as a person, and it creates who you form as a person. And you might be somebody who's more on the tribal science that believes in magic, or you might be on somebody on the religious sense that believes in religion, and you might be somebody that's neither. All these things can form your identity and how you see the world. Identity is, of course, important and crucial. So, how we learn and how we process things is all based on our environment. But to go a little deeper, how we form our ideas and our identity also forms our confidence. The only way that we can learn things and believe things truly, I think, is through confidence. And research has proven that through various psychological studies that literally confidence is what allows us to learn, whether it's us doing it consciously or us kind of just like blind trust and just kind of letting it go, right? There's something that different researchers call like the Superman gene or no man's mind, which is essentially how we get ourselves in a flow state. When we turn our switch off, when we don't think about it in our brain, we can usually manifest it in different ways. The most common two ways is through anger and fun. You can also access it through like sadness, but it's a longer process. But those are the two more common ways. And you tap into something, whether you're having fun or you're being angry, and anger is a little complex, but anger can also be classified under like competitive, and then you like tap into that like quote unquote energy, right? And like that's another way you get into like that flow state. And usually get in that flow state, and once you have a sense of confidence, right? So that's where I think all that stuff connects. And then where, like I said earlier, your belief system, your confidence, how you learn things, I think all these things play a role in how you develop and form the way you see the world. So if none of that made sense, if I just like said a bunch of words, it's like, what the heck is that guy just saying, right? Let me just put it this way, like an example. So you're on a sunny day, right? And you're looking at the sun. So what I think magic is, confidence, belief is, it's kind of like putting on sunglasses. You put on sunglasses and you look at the sun, right? And as you're looking at the sun, you now have the ability to see the sun because of the sunglasses. So I think confidence, belief system, magic, and religion, all these things I think are very interconnected. And I think if you choose to believe in magic, it's all based on how you learn things, your confidence level, and how you perceive things, because it's like psychologically proven that how you learn things is how you perceive things. So the whole sunglasses metaphor again, right? So you're outside, you're putting on these quote unquote magical glasses that now give you the ability to see the sun. So the question is, now that you have the confidence and the belief system to see the sun, it's up to the person to define what that is. So it's like, you can either see that in three different ways. Whatever, I'm putting on sunglasses now, I can see the sun. Maybe I'm like a more rational person, or somebody who's more maybe scientific based. That's like magic's dumb. And then like another person's more magical belief. It's like, oh, this is like, this powerful thing that I was able to access to build. Someone who's a little bit more creative or more open-minded would put on those sunglasses and be like, oh, wow, this is like a magical thing that allowed me to do it. Someone on the religious side might be like, whoa, this is a sign. This is a miracle. Like, I believe that this tool will be helpful for me to put on the glasses. That's my attempt to define magic. That's my attempt to define sorcery. And that's my breakdown from sorcery and magic. This is definitely like a hard thing to define for sure. And I apologize if my last section was like rambly but it's hard. It was hard for me to kind of like ground this because it's a tricky topic. It's a tricky thing to define. And I attempted to use like a little bit of psychology, a little bit of like learning and how you learn things and how we process things to kind of explain what magic is and what my thoughts are of magic and how magic can be just what you choose for it to be. So your natural question might be, do I believe in magic? I would say yes. I would say magic is real, but it also depends how you define it, right? And so another reason why I brought up the psychology thing is because you guys know the thing of the placebo effect. And so the placebo effect is like, if you think it's real, then it's real. And even if it's not true, it doesn't have to be true. But if you can tell yourself it's real, like it'll become reality, right? Our subconscious mind doesn't know the difference in reality or not. And so that's why our belief systems, how we learn, how we process things, our identity shapes how we interpret all those different things. So if you believe magic's real, it's real. If you don't believe it's real, then it's not. But then someone would argue, right? Someone with faith would argue that, like, okay, because someone who believes in God would say that God is real, right? Someone who believes in magic would say magic's real. But someone who doesn't believe in any of those things, they would say that none of those things are real. So, yeah, it's tricky. I know. If you're confused, I'm a little confused too, dude. Magic could be like a psychological state of confidence where you're just like confident in your actions. It could also be like a belief system, as we stated earlier, some kind of religion or just what you believe in. And it could also be like a helpful placebo that benefits us people, or just it's a helpful tool for the world, right? So whether magic is something beneficial for you as like someone who maybe some kind of like healer, or like someone who's like likes to use the natural benefits of natural resources, just like we talked about in the witchcraft video, it's completely up to you. What do you guys think? Am I just like super wrong? Or do you guys agree? What are your thoughts on magic? Do you think it's all make believe? Do you think it's all a bunch of mumbo jumbo? Yeah, let me know. Leave a comment below. So that's been my breakdown from A to Z. So thanks for hanging out with me. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Have an awesome one.